Usually, I record footage for about an hour. I've got a block of time I set aside every day, though these days I do sometimes skip one. And an hour usually gives me enough coverage unless it's a really long game like an RPG. At the end of an hour of Hikari Shinwa Palthena no Kagami, I had just completed the first stage. Not the first world, the first stage. And I'm not completely horrible at Palthena no Kagami. This is just a game that front-loads its difficulty to an extreme degree. I also wound up recording another hour and a half to have some varied footage. The Japanese title could be translated as Light Myth, Palthena's Mirror. And I know that in the past few years, Nintendo has changed the character's name to Palthena, but it is supposed to be a portmanteau of Pallas Athena, Greek goddess of wisdom. At least the main character is definitely Pit, not Icarus. But Icarus is in the game. The plot of Palthena no Kagami is that Medusa was mad at Palthena for some reason. Maybe something to do with turning her into a monster that petrifies everyone she meets. Anyways, Medusa turns Palthena's soldiers to stone, imprisons her champion in the Underworld, steals all of Palthena's good stuff, and takes over Angel Land. You play as Palthena's champion, who first has to climb out of the Underworld, slowly ascending until you reach Angel Land again and can stop Medusa. The game is broken up into essentially 4 worlds, though the 4th one is kind of perfunctory. Every world is divided up into 4 stages, with the first 3 being some form of platforming challenge, and the 4th one being a Zelda-like maze of rooms, though viewed from the side. A jumps, B shoots, and pressing start brings up a status screen. It just shows you your score and inventory, which are important, but not necessarily things you have to refer to constantly. The tricky thing in Palthena no Kagami is that there are several systems in the game that aren't very clearly explained, are absolutely required for you to work with, and in some cases require extensive grinding. Pit starts with nothing, which is what you'd expect for a hero in a video game, but every upgrade that you obtain makes the game dramatically easier. It's not that they alter the challenges that you're facing, though they do that too, and the challenges actually become easier. It's that the game starts out with the enemy placement and patterns at their most difficult, and then over the course of the entire game gives you tools to deal with it. It inverts the difficulty curve. The most obvious system that you'll interact with are the hearts. They act as currency in the game's shops. Hearts come in small, half, and large hearts, and those are worth 1, 5, or 10 respectively. Shops in Palthena no Kagami are very expensive. If you want to get a health recovery, it'll cost you around 200 hearts. You get 1 heart from killing a small enemy. And naturally, because of the way the game curves, at the start when you need those shops the most, you can't afford anything. Later on you'll start earning quite a few hearts, and it's still hard to afford things, but you're less likely to have to try to scrape cash together. Of course, if you want to regularly buy things from shops, you're going to have to grind. A lot. Of course, that feeds into the other 2 important systems. Pit starts out with a minuscule health bar. 8 ticks of health, and most enemies hit you for multiple ticks. The health bar can increase, and the way that you make it grow is through your score. When you reach the end of a stage, if your score is past a certain threshold, then the bar will grow. Now the stages in Palthena no Kagami are relatively long, and because enemies tend to spawn continuously, you're going to be tempted to just run by them. This is a bad idea. You need to boost your score, and to do that, you have to fight the enemies in the overworld. Not the ones in the special rooms, those don't give you score. You just need to boost that score as high as it can go. Otherwise, you're going to get frustrated by having that low health. So grind away. On the positive side of things, you get 3 save slots here, you can save whenever you get a game over, and every bit of your progress is saved, right down to your score. When you continue, only that first chunk of health that Pit initially has gets filled though. And recovering health is its own challenge. There are basically 3 ways to do it. First, you find or buy a chalice. These will be sitting out, they essentially refill 1 block of Pit's health bar. Second, you could buy a bottle or a barrel. These refill one block of Pit's health bar when he dies, and the difference between them is that if you have a barrel, then you can carry multiple bottles, though if you run out of bottles, the barrel goes away as well. So, you know, more grinding for hearts. The other way that you can recover health is that you could find a hot spring and then sit in it for a while. Hot springs don't show up until the 4th stage of World 1, after which they become common. So that's another way where the beginning of the game is made extra difficult. There's one more thing that requires grinding, but also a lot more careful play. There's a hidden score function, and it goes up and down based on a few different things. And this score doesn't just increase, it goes up and down. Every time you fire an arrow, it decreases. Every time you kill a monster, it increases. Getting hit loses points, picking up hearts gets points. This score gets reset to 0 every time you finish a stage, but if it's high enough when you enter particular chambers, then the strength of Pit's arrows are increased, which naturally makes things easier. Basically, if you're on a stage where you know that one of these power-ups is available, you need to grind and be careful. There are other weapon upgrades that you can get from certain chambers where you're continuously attacked and have to survive for a short period of time. Surviving will give you your choice of one of 3 upgrades: crystals that spin around you as a shield, a faster bow with arrows that go the whole way across the screen, or fire shots that add a fireball effect to your arrow. You do have to maintain some high health to keep these weapons running, and there are some enemies that can steal them from you. If they get stolen, you'll have to buy them back on the black market, which requires that you get a card first. Basically, a lot more grinding for hearts. On the Labyrinth stages, the doors link rooms to the side, while ladders link rooms up and down. The ladders are a little bit flaky. You'll find these statues in the Labyrinth, and hitting select will switch you to a hammer if you have any. Then you can break the statue, and your hammer, to free Icarus, and he'll show up to assist you with the boss, though he's totally useless. You can buy them in the shop, and they're actually the only cheap item in the game. Or you could find a harp on the regular stages, and that gives you a period of about 15 seconds where all of the enemies become hammers instead that you can collect. In the Labyrinth you can also find a map, and shops where you can purchase a pencil and torch, which will draw out the links between the chambers and mark your position. Really not worth it. If there's anything that people remember from the Labyrinth stages, it's these guys. Natsubi Tsukai, or eggplant users. One hit from their shots turns Pit into an eggplant. You can't attack in that state, so you have to go back to the one room in the Labyrinth where someone will restore him to normality. Naturally, this room is in an out-of-the-way location, branching off early on in your progress through the Labyrinth. So when you get hit, you basically lose all of your progress. The path through the first Labyrinth is 20 rooms long. There are 6 Natsubi Tsukai in between you and the boss, and by the way, they are rather tough to take down. And the nurse that will restore you is located 4 rooms away from the start. There is a one-way path toward the end to get you back to the beginning, but what this comes down to is really intense frustration, as you have to do the rooms with them perfectly, or basically start over. There's a reason that they're among the most feared enemies in video games. There's one more purchasable item I haven't mentioned yet, and that's the Angel Feather. This will let Pit recover from falling off the stage, though it's very expensive when you need it. The first 3 stages in the Underworld scroll vertically, but they're ratchet scrolling, so as the screen goes up, it can't go back down. And falling off the bottom is fatal. You only have 1 life. You're going to have to fight maneuverable enemies on tiny platforms where you just don't have any space. Pit can fire up, though not aim up then jump. You have to jump then aim up. Still, you just don't have any room to dodge. Something that you can take advantage of, though, is that the screen wraps, so that you can go off the right-hand side and appear on the left. If enemies are tracking you, and there's platforms that allow you to do this, you can take advantage of that to evade them, since enemies don't go off the edge of the screen. World 2 is horizontally scrolling, and as a result is much easier to manage. World 3 puts you back in the sky, going vertically, but by that point you can afford the tools to survive. There is one more system that depends on a hidden score, and that's what ending you get. There are 5 different ending graphics that change depending on how well you did. Some things that factor into it are how many times you had to continue, how many weapon power-ups you got and kept, and of course, all of your other scores. Palthena no Kagami was followed up by a sequel, or at least a sequel on the Game Boy. There was one catch with it, though. It wasn't released in Japan. This has kind of given Japanese players the idea that the game was very popular in the US, even though it had a very mixed reception in Japan. There's also the more recent game for the 3DS, but that's the entire series. As I said, this is a really divisive game in Japan. There are those who sing its praises, and those who think it's a real mess, which I think is kind of the reception it's gotten everywhere. And I have my own complicated feelings about Palthena no Kagami. It's a nice looking game, it's got a wonderful soundtrack. I even think it plays decently if you look at it in very small slices. It's just there's a lot of annoyances here that make it really hard to love this one. A lot of, well, if you had done this a little bit differently, then this would have been fun. It's a game I don't mind going back to every once in a while, but not that often. And while I'm not begging for a sequel, if Nintendo announced tomorrow that they are making a new Palthena no Kagami game, I'd give it a look. I just don't need to play the original again for quite a while.